I would appreciate your patience with me. I don't feel very good for whatever reason. If you saw me up close, you would see my nose kind of looks like Carl Malden. Now, if we have anybody younger listening, they're never going to understand that. Then I could say, well, W.C. Fields, and then nobody would really understand that one either. So anyway, today I have changed my title slide, and here it is. Okay, why is this not showing up on the screen? There we go. Do you remember the movie Wargames with Matthew Broderick? It came out 36 years ago. I can't believe it's been that long. And back then they used that kind of goofy green font on the screen that was not all that pleasant to look at. And at one point he broke into the computer that controlled our thermonuclear weapons, and the computer communicated back to him, "Would you like to play a game?" And suggested that he said global thermonuclear war, and then the computer responded, "Well, would you like to play chess?" And I've used this analogy a number of times before that Persians, Iranians invented chess, and Russians have kind of perfected it. And a lot of times, you've seen the graphics I've used where you have a checkerboard table, a chessboard, and on one side you have John Kerry or Barack Obama with a bunch of checkers in front of them. And on the other side you have Khomeini or Rouhani with a bunch of chess pieces, and some of the chess pieces look like missiles. So I thought, well, I'll take that and I'll make that into a nice little graphic for the day's title slide, because I think, as you'll see when we get towards the end of this, that there's really a game of chess that's going on. And exactly how this all plays out, I mean, I know certain things are going to happen. There are certain wars that are prophesied. Exactly when they're going to happen, I don't know. None of us know exactly when these are coming. So we talk each week, so we'll talk about that in just a moment. We talk about the convergence of all these things that are happening, all these things that are prophesied, and we know they'll be fulfilled in a future period of time, but now we can see at least the foundations being laid in place. Here's my humorous slide of the week: a gas-powered van towing a diesel generator, charging an electric car. The future is stupid. Now, you know, I always find it interesting when mainstream media picks up on things that are themes in Bible prophecy. So we know one of the things that is prophesied is a great mountain falling to the earth. And it sounds like an asteroid. So there are all these, there are a lot of different theories out there about Planet X and this type of thing. But I'm always interested when mainstream media picks it up and gives you sort of a apocalyptic version of what's going on. This was an article that was in the Wall Street Journal yesterday. The asteroid peril isn't science fiction. And essentially what it says is, listen, this appears that it's going to happen, and there's nothing we can do to stop it. That's the two-sentence summary of the article. You know, man thinks they're pretty good. When Jesus was in the boat and the storm came up and he calmed the storm, the disciples were astonished at his power, right? They said, what manner of man is this that even the winds and the sea obey him? So that's why I'm not, I know there's a lot of theories about everything, all the weather's being geoengineered and that type of thing. My concern in doing that is you're elevating people to the level of gods. So I think we need to be careful with that speculation, because I think that it's a little bit dangerous because of the way you elevate people. I agree there are bad people out there. They want to do bad things. They want to run everything. They want to control you. They want to take all your stuff. And I agree with that. I mean, I don't doubt that they're out there. Now, sometimes I don't think they're very well organized because they've been at it for hundreds and hundreds of years, and they really haven't accomplished their goal. But when the time is right, God will sort of pull back the veil and allow them to flourish for a short season. This is summer in Mexico, Guadalajara, Mexico. They had a hailstorm, a freak hailstorm, that resulted in places that was 5.5 feet deep on a 90-degree day in Guadalajara, Mexico. It appears that something is going on. I mean, constantly I'm reading articles about this happened, that happened. It's unprecedented. The word unprecedented is used all the time. Now, this is not necessarily unprecedented. The other day, there was a 6.4 earthquake up in Ridgecrest, which is sort of on the slopes of the Sierra Nevadas above the Central Valley of California. I had friends that live in Las Vegas. They could feel the earth rolling in Vegas, which is about 235 miles away. About 150 miles north of Los Angeles. People all over Southern California felt it, San Bernardino. So it was a pretty big deal. And then Friday night to Saturday morning, there was yet another earthquake. This one was 7.1, which was even bigger. I've seen pictures. I didn't have time to grab the videos this week because I only worked a couple days this week. So, of course, I didn't have time to do any of this. But I worked at work for a couple days this week. I have other things that I've been working on. I've got some conferences coming up that I'm preparing for. But, I saw pictures of people's pools, and it looked like, waves in the ocean in their backyard pool. I remember some friends of ours in Ventura. We had just left their house and flew home, and not very shortly after we left, an earthquake hit. This was back in the 90s. And they had a pool, and everybody's pool was emptied out of water. And they said the land looked like somebody was taking a blanket and doing this with it, and somebody holding on to the other end. So it was like this rolling of all the land and everything. And it can be pretty frightening. So 6.4, then a 7.1 caused some fires, caused some damage. Some roads are closed, at least for a few days, because they have to repair them. Here's a little map from the LA Times this morning. The epicenter of the earthquake there in Ridgecrest. You can see Lancaster, Palmdale is south of there. It looks a little bit closer than it is. I remember once, Pam will remember this, we were going to see some friends, and they said we live just outside of Palmdale. So we get to the east, so we live east of Palmdale, just outside of Palmdale. So we get to the east side of Palmdale at 151st Street, and they lived on 169th Street. And we thought, 17 blocks, 18 blocks. 152nd Street was a mile from 151st Street, which means they were like 19 miles outside of Palmdale. But out there, they drive that far for a cup of coffee, 50 miles for a cup of coffee. But this impacted Vegas, felt it. Talked to a pastor friend in Bakersfield, or texted with him yesterday, and he felt the 7.1. He had not felt the 6.4, but he said, it was certainly a jolt. Now, a few weeks ago, I played a video that showed from 1900 to 2000 all of the earthquakes above a certain, I think it was above 6.5 that occurred. I found a video that updated that through 2015. So I'm going to play this. These are all the major earthquakes that have happened. It shows you the depth that they went to over the, and I cut the video down. It's a several minute video. So this starts in 2000, and it'll go up through 2015. And you can see these are quite a large number of earthquakes. 6.5 and above around the world. You can now see why they call it the Ring of Fire around the Pacific Ocean with all the volcanic activity. Saw articles this week that the geyser activity is way up in Yellowstone Park. They don't really have an explanation for that. And listen, you're going to hear this. You're going to hear, this is unprecedented. We don't know why it's happening. I have a very strong suspicion as to why it's happening. It's what's prophesied, and it seems like it happens all the time. And it's constantly, we see these things that say unprecedented. Now, I'm going to talk just a moment about, and I talk about leftism. By the way, I don't know if you know, this week I was accused of being a Freemason. I don't even know where they meet. I don't. I really don't. And I know Pastor Steve's accused of doing it because he might hold his hands like this. Or it's just, listen, people, don't do that. It's silly. It's a good way. If you want to ever be blocked from commenting on our YouTube channel, accuse me of being a Freemason. That's an automatic block. There's a couple others, but I won't go into those right now. But I don't know if you saw the videos of Andy Ngo. NGO is his last name. He's a journalist. He's a homosexual, conservative, and he was reporting on an Antifa protest in Portland, Oregon. He was beat up. He was beat up pretty bad. The police really didn't do anything about it. And as I watched the way people on, that would sort of lean his way politically, they say, oh, this is just terrible what Antifa did. And all the Antifa leftist supporters were going like, well, he was asking for it by being there. I guess they were throwing milkshakes with quick-drying liquid cement at his head. Portland's even now taking a step of thinking about putting in an ordinance that does not allow people to wear masks in public at a protest. And I think this is a good thing. And they do this for a reason, because one, beyond the point that they're just flat out cowards, they're evil cowards, and they want to hurt people and they want to get away with it. And thus far they have been. So Portland doesn't seem to be doing a little bit about it. Now, this week in the French press, and I looked up the article, and I spent all this time going through Google Translate, and Google Translate really does a pretty good job. I actually took French in high school. I would say that my Hebrew pronunciation is much, much better than my French pronunciation. My French teacher was a very wonderful teacher. She was a Jewish lady from the Bronx. And so you can imagine her French had kind of a New York accent to it. So I never really learned. I figure, well, I'm not going to France anyway, probably. So this is up. But so this week there was these articles in the French press, and the New York Times reported on this, and they reported about legislation that's been proposed in France, came up for another hearing in the legislature this week. And the article in the New York Times is, France will debate a bill to stop online hate speech. What's at stake? And the lady that you see in the picture here is the French parliamentarian who is the energy behind pushing this through the legislature. And I saw some of the tweets that she gets, and they're awful, racist, terrible tweets. And she just says, well, we just can't have this kind of speech in our society. This is hate speech. It's not really free. It shouldn't be free speech. And the question then becomes, where do you draw the line? Listen to the New York Times says this. Some critics argue that the legislation puts the onus for regulating content solely on online platforms, and that tech companies, unwilling or unable to appreciate the subtleness of regulating speech, will be overzealous in their policing. That will be harmful to free speech, critics say, because what the France law requires all the major internet platforms, Facebook, Twitter, and that type of thing, is to put essentially a hate button, and you click on the hate button, and then the internet company has 24 hours to take it down or make a judgment call as to whether it's actually hate speech. And if it's later determined that they left it up and it's hate speech, they face fines of tens of thousands of dollars per day, per incident. Well, what do you think is going to happen? We've talked about this before. The online content companies will say, well, the safe thing is to just take it all down. And so what it will do is you will have, little fascists out there pressing the hate button on Facebook or Twitter, and conservative views will be effectively banned from the forum. In Le Figaro, this is a French newspaper. This was a couple weeks ago. It goes without saying that the fight against hate content is eminently legitimate, but to warn offenses concerned, namely insults or incitement to hatred because of race, religion, etc., and this risk is not a view of the mind. Now, this is, again, the French translation of an article. To be convinced of this, just take a look at the risk to the freedom of opinion entailed by such a text, the inevitable effect of which will be a risk of overblocking on the part of the platform operators at the borders of the few examples. This was an article written by a French lawyer objecting to the law. And then there was, in a magazine called Le Point, a French magazine, the lady who's pushing this said, the text I'm proposing requires the platforms to remove within 24 hours any manifestly unlawful content that includes incitement to hatred or violence, injury on the basis of alleged race, religion, nationality, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, or disability. So what does that include? Well, it includes a lot of the stuff I talk about here. It includes a lot of the content of the Bible. I don't know if you saw this week in the Israel-Folau saga in Australia, it was leaked to the press some of the testimony that the lady that runs Rugby Australia gave at the hearing that they had to terminate Izzy Folau's contract. And she essentially said, yes, he put up a paraphrase of the Bible, but if he put up the Bible, that's hate speech too. I mean, she came right out and said that this is hate speech. And so this is, and the article goes, and she acknowledges that for the sake of sanctions, they will apply the precautionary principle. So rather than think about it, they're going to ban anything that they think might be hate speech, which limits speech. So it'll be interesting to see how they come up with this. I think there are some ways to actually regulate this. I don't think the defense that, well, they're just a private company, you can't do anything to them. I mean, I have a problem if I say something that's based on the Bible and they ban me as a hate or genocide promoter or something like that. Personally, I think that's slander, libel, and it's actionable because it's not true. I wish I could play for you the well, there was an article this week in some of the papers in England and in the UK talking about two 10-year-old girls who had been dismissed, expelled from class. They were doing a lesson on transgender something. The little girl objected to it and said, no, there are only two genders. You're born male or female. The teacher kicked her out of class. And then later when it came up and the teacher was a transgender activist, she said, well, you said you should kill all those people. And the little 10-year-old girl goes, no, I didn't say that. And her little 10-year-old friend says, no, she didn't say that. And they were both expelled from their class. And I mean, I can show you example after example after example of this stuff happening each week. And the teacher, I mean, I don't think there's any question that the teacher was making it up. She was telling what you want to hear. Listen, I'm a trial lawyer. I put together a case. I look at all the facts. And you have to be very careful that you only look at the facts in the light most favorable to your client. You have to look at all sides of the issue. And so what I see a lot of times is people, they just, well, you know, this is the facts, and because they have an agenda. And so they let the agenda drive how they interpret the facts or the evidence. And this, I think, is exactly what the teacher was doing. Now, there was some good news in the UK this week in that a higher court reinstated a student a Christian student who had said in a Facebook post or a Twitter post that gay marriage was a sin. He was in a counseling program at the University of Sheffield. I've talked about this in the past. And he was terminated because they said, well, you can't hold that view and be unbiased to counsel people ever if you hold that view. You're just automatically disqualified. So there was a very good decision from the Court of Appeals. PJ Media said this on Wednesday: 3 appeals court judges ruled that the university wrongly confused the expression of religious views with the notion of discrimination. The mere expression of views on theological grounds, i.e. that homosexuality is a sin, does not necessarily connote that the person expressing such views will discriminate on such grounds. The case hinged on whether the Health and Care Professions Council guidance prohibiting comments which were offensive, the HCPC, they control the licensing of a lot of professions in the UK. They have given guidance prohibiting comments which were offensive, for example, if they were racist or sexually explicit, applied in this case, justifying this gentleman's expulsion from the university. And not just from the program, from the university. And this fight has gone on for years. I think I started talking about it at least 3 years ago. And finally, they're saying, oh, you can go back. Now, there's some weaknesses in the decision, and I won't go into those now, but at least for the time being, the Court of Appeals there in the UK has said, no, you can't do this. The judges noted that the university consistently argued that the student's expression of Bible-based beliefs on homosexual activity proved he would discriminate against LGBT people. Now, we should bring the Court of Appeals up on charges because they left out the Q part. Regardless of the lack of any evidence showing such discrimination. In a telling passage, PJ Media article says, the judges noted that the university's lawyer, Sarah Hannett, made it clear that any expression of disapproval of same-sex relations, however mildly expressed, which could be traced back to the person making it, would be a breach of the professional guidelines for social workers as far as the university was concerned. This was effectively a blanket ban on religious speech critical of homosexuality. The ban did not even have a strong limiting principle, the judges ruled. While the university claimed the student was entitled to hold the Bible-based view that homosexual activity is a sin, they claim he could not express such a view publicly. Even private speech could be subject to censure, however, the judges pointed out. What if a private expression of views was overheard and reported? The postings in question, what if somebody made it up that you said this, like this teacher did with this 10-year-old girl? So I think this is going to be litigated. There's a very chilling effect. A lot of people, listen, I can tell you, I know a lot of people that are conservatives. They work in big companies and that type of thing. And they say, I just keep my mouth shut. Because if I spoke out on it, I would get fired. So effectively, they're able to limit speech. So that's something I think you should watch in the future. Well, let's look at geopolitics for a moment, and we'll get to our little chess game here in just a moment. But, of course, President Trump, I mentioned this briefly last Sunday, stepped into North Korea with Kim Jong-il, the first guy to go to, first president to step into North Korea. And so there's all this, the papers were all over the place about, oh, this is good, this is bad, this is awful, Trump is stupid, Trump is smart. It's choose whichever conclusion that you want. I'm concerned about it because I see a very significant correlation between the way Kim Jong-il negotiates, sort of ramping things up and then getting some money out of people, and the way that the Iranians negotiate. They kind of operate from the same negotiating playbook. Now, there was a big to-do earlier in the week with a Russian submarine. Russian submarine had a fire. Here's what we know. We don't know where it happened. We don't know why it happened. The only thing that we know is that 14 Russian sailors, 14 of whom held the rank of captain out of 25 on the sub, died. Two of those had the Russian equivalent of the Congressional Medal of Honor. The crew, this is the article from Investia, said this: the crew on board the ship, the sub, is believed to be the best professionals in the country, and several Russian experts doubt that human error was the reason for the accident. So here's the thing: is everybody had an opinion, everybody had a conclusion, all of which are based on very scant evidence. We know that the accident occurred. In fact, there was a sort of an extraordinary meeting that was filmed. This is Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu. And this is you can turn the sound down because this is in Russian, and I'm pretty sure nobody will understand it. But 14 submariners died. Putin talked about it as highly professional crew. And this is kind of an unusual thing that they would do this. Now, there was also some reports that around the time Putin was having this meeting with all of his top security and defense experts at the Kremlin in Moscow, that Mike Pence was supposed to go to an event in New Hampshire. Air Force Two was on the ground ready to go. Or anyway, he was called back to the White House for a special meeting. We don't know what the meeting was about. A lot of speculation out there. President Trump said, you'll know in a few weeks. So I guess we're going to have to wait to a few weeks. But in the meantime, of course, we can all just wildly speculate about everything that happened or didn't happen. So again, my concern is I try to be very careful. I know people say, you got to do an update every day or an update twice a week. First of all, I do work for a living, so I don't have the time. But secondly, my concern is, and even now talking about it, my concern is that, look, I think definitely something happened. I don't think this Russian sub was up to any good. There are reports that they scuttled a U.S. submarine. Not seen anything to confirm that. I think it's very hard for people to keep the scuttling of a U.S. submarine quiet unless it was a drone sub. But I don't know that we have drone subs like the Russians have drone subs. So I think that we have to be careful about wanting to be the first to talk about something. I would rather everybody was more concerned about being right when they talk about something. So look, there was something that happened. It could lead to war. We'll know, but now it's been 4 or 5 days, and there doesn't seem to be any buildup or anything like that that's taking place in response to it. So the more time goes, I'm inclined to think that the Russian sub had an accident. They had a big accident on one of their big submarines about 20 years ago, and 118 sailors died. So this is very embarrassing for the Russians. This is sort of highlighting their technology. So again, let's be careful about wild speculation. Maybe I ought to do the list like John speculates on everything in the world some Sunday, and just. But I think we need to be careful about what we talk about, and not buy into the hype. I saw a lot of that this week. Now, in Jerusalem last week, I didn't have time to play this last week, they had a conference for Israel Hayom newspaper. That newspaper is published by Sheldon Adelson and his wife. He is a billionaire Las Vegas casino owner. He's very pro-Israel, and they had an event in Jerusalem, and they had a certain former U.S. ambassador to the United Nations appear. I think my judgment is she's campaigning for 2024, and she's starting to get some of her financial support in place. And here's a little clip from that event. This is Mrs. Adelson, who is the publisher of Israel Hayom.
Nikki has been known by many titles: governor, ambassador, Republican leader, and potential first female president of the United States.
So, now is she? I don't know. I think Pence will run in 2024 with the caveat, ... assuming we're still around here at the time. Things can change very quickly. Now, at the Bahrain conference, I wanted to play a short clip of Tony Blair, who was involved in geopolitics, Prime Minister of England for a long time, the UK. Certainly a man who is to the left of center in his politics. But at the Bahrain conference, he was interviewed by Jared Kushner, and he had some interesting comments to make. I pulled these out and thought you might like to hear them.
When I take a step back and I look at this region, I think there are two big questions. Can you get to societies of religious tolerance? And can you get to rule-based economies? The Israeli-Palestinian issue's got some very specific characteristics. But in the end, if you think about it, it's of the essence that the Jewish state of Israel and the predominantly Muslim Palestine can live together. And that will only happen if there is that deep cultural acceptance alongside all the different bits of the negotiation and politics. And I say, actually the frustrating thing is that in one sense, it's really easy to resolve, because it's obvious that in the end, you're going to have two peoples side by side living in peace with each other. Now, I would say also two states, but it's so clear that that's where you need to get to, and that if you do get there, the potential benefits for both Israelis and Palestinians are just ginormous. As I said to you just a moment ago, this may be your youth and my innate crazy optimism, but I genuinely do believe it is possible to find a solution to this issue. I think it is still fundamentally important, but I think time is running out. We need imagination, we need creativity, we need leadership, we need it from all sides, and we need it now, because as we speak day by day, ordinary people amongst the Palestinians are not getting the breaks they deserve. And actually one thing that this conference shows is that we all care about doing that for them and with them.
So it was interesting. He even suggested in his talk, his interview with Jared Kushner, that maybe we need an interim agreement, which I thought was kind of interesting, and how that might play into Bible prophecy. Is this the agreement that we're talking about with, confirms the covenant with the many? I don't know. The Bible doesn't really specify what that covenant is. It could be, I think, if you look at the term covenant, I think it could be a peace treaty. I think that would be a possible interpretation of that particular word. But we'll see. We'll know. When it happens, we'll know. Now, this is the Temple Mount. You can see the Al-Aqsa Mosque, the Dome of the Al-Aqsa Mosque on the right. In the center, you can see the Golden Dome of the Rock and the minaret there. And this is the southern wall of the Temple Mount. Below that is a Arab Palestinian village called Silwan. It was, when Jordan controlled the area, it was part of the country of Jordan. It was taken back in the 67 war. And it's in this area and some of the related areas more to the east that people say there'll be a Palestinian capital if there's a two-state solution. It'll be more to the east, but this is the south. But it's built over the ancient city of David. Now, some of you have been to Israel, and you've been to I don't know where this thing is now, but this is the Jerusalem model at the time of Christ. And you can see certain things here. There is here, let me get my laser pointer. This is see this square area here? That's the Pool of Siloam. About 15 years ago, there was a broken sewage pipe. When they went to fix the sewage pipe, they had to excavate, of course, dig down. And when they dug down, they found the Pool of Siloam that's referenced in Scripture a number of times. It was a very significant archaeological find. As they have been excavating, and again, when they excavate, the excavations are taking place underneath these homes. So they're putting up steel superstructure and that type of thing. Palestinians are upset about it, but you can see there's an Israeli flag there. Settlers are buying property. They're spending millions of dollars on these properties, buying properties and moving into the apartments and homes that are there. And this is a big political issue. So in In connection with the Pool of Siloam, what they found was, as you see here, there is a roadway that goes this way, a path, a paved path. In fact, this is sort of an outline of where it is. And it goes from the Pool of Siloam all the way up to the Temple Mount, a distance of about 2,100 feet, about a little less than half a mile. Now, a week ago Friday, in the Jerusalem Post magazine, they actually had an article, Unearthing the Pilgrimage Road. This is a very significant archaeological find. It's a very significant discovery. And of course, the article, there was a big ceremony to open the last part to allow people to walk along the pilgrimage road. Here's a little bit of the ceremony. First, here's an interview with one of the people that's involved in the City of David excavations.
Today is a truly historic day as we open the pilgrimage road that led the early pilgrims of Judaism back from the times of the Bible all the way north to the Temple Mount. The actual stones of that road have been worn smooth by the heels of Jewish men, women, and children for thousands of years. And here we are, together with the American government, celebrating the Jewish connection to Jerusalem.
We are here in the Pool of the Shiloach. In a historic moment, we are opening the road that leads to the Temple Mount. We're going to walk in the same road as the people who lived here did it thousands of years ago. I intend to bring dozens of delegations of diplomats to be here and to see the historic connection between the Jewish people and Jerusalem. You cannot deny it. I saw some people protesting outside, and I tell them, shame on you. You should come here and get connected yourself to our ancient history, to our ancient Jerusalem.
And so here's a picture of the tunnel that they've excavated. You can see how they've had to put up steel infrastructure to prevent the homes above from collapsing. And they've supposedly 16 homes have had cracks in the walls that have appeared. I mean, this is a major engineering feat. This is sort of like, remember the big dig in Boston? They put that road down. They didn't really increase the road capacity. They just put underground about 100 feet. And I was there. I looked down at those things. I mean, there's like 10 stories down was this thing. But here, so they've excavated this. Now you can go and you can walk, and you can see how the stones have been worn smooth by the tens of thousands of Jewish people who, at the time of the Second Temple period, walked this road. I believe it was constructed by Hezekiah. One of the speakers at the ceremony was U.S. Ambassador David Freeman. He had some interesting comments.
Were there any doubt? And to me there never was, and I'm sure to no one else there was ever a doubt. But were there ever any doubt about the accuracy, the wisdom, the propriety of President Trump recognizing Jerusalem as the capital of Israel? I certainly think this lays all doubts to rest. Now, how did our founding fathers know what those rights were? How did our founding fathers know what particular rights were so important that they would be endowed to us by our Creator? Well, the answer is, among other things, they read the Bible. Those rights, the right to life, the right to liberty, the right to the pursuit of happiness, those are rights that were given to mankind, given to us by God, and they're in the Bible. And where did the words of the Bible come from? From what place in the world did the Torah come from? Did the Word of God come from? All you need to do is look at the book of Isaiah. Isaiah, who lived in the same period as King Hezekiah, who built that Brechat HaShiloach. So what did Isaiah say? He said, I'll say it first in Hebrew, Ki mitzion teitzei Torah u'devar Hashem miYerushalayim. Out of Zion shall go forth the law and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. Isaiah chapter 2, verse 3.
Well, he goes on and he also quotes Isaiah chapter 42, verse 4, which talks about beating the swords into plowshares, and neither shall they know war anymore. It's interesting that this is all coming about at this time. Now, I've referenced this passage quite a few times. I'm not going to read all of it, but Ezekiel chapter 36 is a great prophecy. It's really one of my favorite passages of Scripture because it talks about the restoration of Israel. And to me, the restoration of Israel occurs, and it's kind of a it's a good thing. It's helpful for us to know that these things are going to happen. So it says this: also, thou son of man, prophesy to the mountains of Israel, and say, ye mountains of Israel, hear the word of the Lord. Thus saith the Lord, because the enemy has said against you, aha, even the ancient high places are ours in possession. Now, where was the biblical heartland of Israel? It was the central mountain ridge of Israel. Who occupies that land today? That's under the control, by and large, of the Palestinians. There's a few Jewish settlements up through there. But do the Palestinians today say, we have what you had? Do they do that? And the answer is yes. And so I think there's no question in my mind that this whole passage applies to today. And it goes on in that passage to verse 16. Moreover, the word of the Lord came unto me, saying, Son of man, when the house of Israel dwelt in their own land, they defiled it by their own way, and by their doings. Their way was before me as the uncleanness of a removed woman. Wherefore I poured my fury upon them for the blood that they had shed upon the land, and for the idols wherewith they had polluted it. And I scattered them among the heathen, and they were dispersed through the countries according to their way, and according to their doings I judged them. Verse 20. And when they entered into the heathen, whither they went, they profaned my holy name when they said to them, these are the people of the Lord, and are gone forth out of his land. But, and this is a great passage, it shows the mercy and grace of God. How many of you deserve to be saved? Be honest. I know you. My wife knows me, and she would say, you didn't either. But God in his mercy and grace reaches out to people even though they may not deserve it. But he says, but I had pity for my holy name, which the house of Israel had profaned among the heathen, whither they went. Therefore say unto the house of Israel, thus saith the Lord God, I do not this for your sakes, O house of Israel, but for my holy name's sake, which ye have profaned among the heathen, whither you went. And I will sanctify my great name, which was profaned among the heathen, which ye have profaned in the midst of them, and the heathen shall know that I am the Lord. Now, this is something I don't think the heathen have learned yet, and I think they will. But it also implies in this passage that the Jewish people will be gathered back in the land of Israel in a state of unbelief. Verse 24, for I will take you from among the heathen and gather you out of all countries, and will bring you into your own land. Then, after they're back, then will I sprinkle clean water upon you, and ye shall be clean from all your filthiness and from all your idols, and I will cleanse you. This verse has not been fulfilled yet. A new heart also will I give you, and a new spirit will I put within you, and I will take away the stony heart out of your flesh, and will give you a heart of flesh. And I will put my spirit within you, and cause you to walk in my statutes, and ye shall keep my judgments and do them. Now, Pastor Friedman went on to speak, and when he finished, they had a little bit of this ceremony. Dave, just be careful with the sound on this, because it came through pretty loud. And then there's David Friedman taking a sledgehammer and knocking through the last wall so people could take a walk on the pilgrimage path. Jason Greenblatt was also there. Sheldon Adelson was there, his wife. Mrs. Adelson was there. A bunch of diplomats. And, of course, people who don't like Jewish people and who don't like Israel, they went ballistic. Sledgehammer diplomacy, they called it. I don't usually do this, but True News put up this graphic with their video about this. Sledgehammer diplomacy. I don't hate Jews, they say. Look at that. I mean, that's more offensive, I think, than that wiener dog with the leading Trump, with Benjamin Netanyahu's head leading Trump around. So, but this is the way people react. Oh, the Jews, they have no right to the land. The Palestinians are great. I saw Linda Sarsour this morning tweeting about the fact that Jesus was a Palestinian. And it's not a race, it's a place, she said. So this is the narrative. And I've heard True News say this. Jesus was from Palestine. It wasn't called Palestine those days. So there's a article about how the Palestinians reacted to this. Their reaction was a little bit muted. The JCPA had a good article called An Israeli Victory on the Pilgrimage Road in Jerusalem. In an almost desperate step, the PA issued a radical statement. The PA chairman called to take action against the continued Israeli archaeological excavations in the Temple Mount area. This will not weaken our dedication to our ideals, most importantly, the preservation of Jerusalem, the PA chairman noted. He directed the Palestinian Foreign Ministry to work with the United Nations and the Organization of Islamic Cooperation against Israel's archaeological excavations. Jordanian and Palestinian resistance to the archaeological excavations in East Jerusalem is not new. These excavations expose unequivocal evidence of Jewish sovereignty on the Temple Mount and the city of David. Sensitivity to the issue grew after America declared Jerusalem the capital of Israel. The Bahrain Conference contributed to the growing tensions. So does the expected publication of the Deal of the Century, which is scheduled to take place. I've heard it might be published in the next couple of weeks. It may wait till after the election in September. And so here is an article on the Jerusalem Post on Friday. Palestinians missing their final opportunity. Abba Eban, who was the initial Israeli ambassador to the UN, a very bright man, very intelligent. There's a very famous interview that he did with Mike Wallace about 60 years ago. And one that he's sort of, I think he coined the phrase, the Arabs never miss an opportunity to miss an opportunity. And boy, do the Palestinians ever go after that. Well, let's look a little bit more at the Middle East, and we'll finish up here shortly. Iran, sanctions have been put on Iran. And what they're finding, this is from the front page of the New York Times the other day, bound for Iran, tankers vanish and return full. So what's happening is they're turning off, there's websites where you can go and you can find essentially the location of every ship in the world, just like you can find the location of virtually every aircraft in the world. There really aren't many secrets. And so Iran is getting around the sanctions by as they come into the Gulf off Oman there, they turn off all their transponders. They go up the Persian Gulf. They get filled with oil, and then they come back, and when they get past the Straits of Hormuz, they turn their transponders back on. It's just a miracle that they are able to go undetected. So this is a problem. This shows how Iran is not cooperating. So I did this. What we have here is a game of chess. And the Iranians have been very clever. Now listen, Israel's very clever also. So I haven't bothered with them. I put pawns and that sort of thing in all of the different places where the Iranians have militia groups, local militia groups, and that type of thing. You'll see here in the middle of the frame, they're just next to the left of the Israeli king. Chess piece is the Hezbollah rook with the little Hezbollah flag flying out of it, where they have somewhere around 150,000 rockets aimed at Israel. And I was reading a ridiculous article this morning. Oh, there's no threat to Israel. Nobody's ever attacked Israel, blah, blah, blah. And Israel's attacking them, and it's like, well, it was just very bad analysis because they ignore what's going on. They ignore all the stuff that the Iranians are doing. And so the Iranians are essentially playing chess. Now, there was a conference this week at Herzliya, and the former director of the Mossad spoke, and he said, listen, we're at a place of time where this is a unique opportunity to achieve regional peace. And a lot of people were kind of shocked at what he said. And he kind of took credit that the Mossad had been behind the Oman, the reaching out to Oman and the visit to Oman that took place. But he says Iran is pushing in the opposite direction. For 40 years, it has been aspiring to undermine the Middle East to obtain a regional hegemony. This is in Hebrew, so I didn't put any sound with it. Well, anyway, so he's saying, look, we're at this unique point in history where we may have this opportunity to achieve regional peace. This is a very important speech. You can look it up on the Herzliya Conference website. And he says, yeah, I don't understand. We don't really have a territorial conflict with Iran. They're far away. I mean, you can see the Tehran that's over here by the body of water on the right is a good, 1,000 miles or more from Jerusalem. So they don't have common border, but Iran has announced they want to get Israel. Now, the foreign minister and director of intelligence in the acting Israeli cabinet, Israel Katz, also gave a speech here at this. And this is reported widely in the Israeli press. In response to his speech, a top Iranian commander came out and said, we have secret weapons and we're going to destroy Israel. Here's a little from the article about it. In late June, the IDF was reported to have stepped up its alert status amid concerns that Iran might try to attack Israel through one of its proxies. Israel is surrounded by Iranian proxies, Hezbollah in Lebanon and Syria, militia groups in Syria, and Palestinian Islamic Jihad in Gaza. So that's why I put these ponds there. They're controlling all these groups in all these different places. The article in the Jerusalem Post said, between them, there are tens of thousands of rockets that can strike into Israel's home front. While an attack by Iranian proxies is a major concern for the IDF, it is Iran's nuclear and ballistic missile program that worry Israel's defense establishment the most. And so what you see going on here is you see Iran positioning its people. We see Turkey in the northern part of Syria. We see Russia in Syria. Of course, we know that the Syrian government fell, is kind of being propped up by Russia, and Iran is developing a lot of missiles, and they say they're not afraid to use them, and they'll destroy Israel, they'll destroy Tel Aviv, they'll destroy the United States. Turkey this week announced a trilateral summit on Syria with Russia and Iran. So, this is, you see the players that appear to be in Ezekiel 38 and 39 getting together for a number summit later this summer. Now, they never agree on anything. The G20 met, they never agreed on anything. They have all these meetings and conferences, and nobody ever agrees on anything. But people get a lot of frequent flyer miles, I guess. Now, there are two articles, one in Al Arabiya and then Jonathan Spires' great article in the Jerusalem Post. Militias merge into Iraqi security forces. What does it mean? The article in Al Arabiya is titled, Iran is opening a new regional front in Iraq, and the U.S. must act. And the summary of the article is this. Iran is putting together all these militia groups in Iraq. There was an attack on Saudi Arabia, originally thought to come from Yemen. They're now pretty sure that originated in Iraq with some of these Syrian militia groups. But the problem is they're part of the Iraqi national government security apparatus. They have access to the billions of dollars of equipment and that type of thing that we've left in Iraq. They have access to our intelligence and that sort of thing. They are controlled directly by the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. You should look up Jonathan Spires' article. It lays out exactly what's going on. We also know at the other end of the Mediterranean that a tanker filled with Iranian oil bound for Syria was seized by British forces off Gibraltar this week. And of course, Iran is like, hey, we're gonna continue to do this. We're going to enrich uranium beyond the set limits. This was from the Tehran Times or the Iran Daily the other day. And so this is a very difficult security situation for Israel. What do they do? What does the U.S. do? Do you just let it go? Do you just ignore it? What do you think Iran is going to do? They say over and over again what they want to do if they get these weapons. And at some point, the world needs to take them seriously. Now, there was an article in Ynet News by, now I'm going to forget his name. He's a journalist, award-winning journalist in Israel. And essentially, this is an excellent article. You should look it up. It's, hang on a second here. I think I might have it in my iPad. Ron Ben Yashai. The headline in that article reads, and it's never been translated. It came out about a month ago in Ynet, and it's called "Why We Won't Win the Next War." Now, he goes through a very detailed analysis as to what the problems are. This was also discussed at the Israel Hayom conference. Again, this is in Hebrew, so I don't have the sound up. But this is a former deputy commander of some of the Israeli forces. And I think if you look at it, he sort of agrees with the article in Ynet. And they had a whole panel to discuss this. Is Israel going to win the next war? And they pointed to a number of things saying, look, Israel society has lost its desire to fight to the death, I guess is the best way to say it. He noted a lot of things, and you see, and I see a lot of parallels between what's going on in Israel and what's going on in the United States. There are members of the IDF, not all of them, there are a lot of good people in the IDF, so I'm not running down the IDF. Excuse me. You who don't live in Ohio, Friday and Saturday were two of the most humid days I think I've ever seen. And I did play. I actually quit a round of golf early yesterday morning. We teed off at 6:25 a.m. and it was like 95% humidity, and it was brutal. And I think I got dehydrated, and I've been drinking water and everything since, and I don't think I'm back. But I actually quit early, which is pretty unusual for me. But back to Israel. You don't need to know about my problems. But what's happening in Israel is some of the parents of these IDF soldiers, they are mandated by law to serve 3 years for males, 2 years for females. If they're disciplined by their unit, what do the parents do? Do they say, well, son or daughter, you should not have done that? No, they start calling politicians. It's like what happens at our universities in America. I know this is a story that was related to me by a university president. He said, we had a student here. This is in middle America. She was from 12 hours away on the East Coast. She sent a text to her professor at about 3:30. He had not responded by 5 p.m., 3:30 p.m. Hour and a half later, he had not responded to her text. She called her parents, and the next morning at 7 a.m., they were in the president's office wanting to talk to the president of the university. They had driven 12 and a half hours from their home on the East Coast to middle America because their daughter didn't get her text answered quickly enough. Well, now translate that over to what's going on in the military. And so when people are disciplined in the IDF, a lot of times what happens is the politicians get involved and the commanders lose their authority. And I think these people rightly note that Israel was victorious in 1967. They were sort of victorious in 1973, but they've not had what you would consider to be a total victory. And I think there are commentators that have noted, Daniel Pipes being one, that if they're ever going to get to some point of place where there's peace, they have to have total victory over the Palestinians. And they have not had that yet. And these gentlemen were talking in large part that I don't know that we have the stomach for that. A soldier gets killed in action or kidnapped, and the whole country shuts down and, goes into depression until they get the kid freed. And it's not wrong to care about them. That his point is, we have to win. We have to have a victory. And his concern is, and also the gentleman who wrote the article on Ynet, their concern is that eventually Israel, a lot of people are just going to give up and leave. So the aliyah that's been taking place over the last 100 years will be reversed, they think. Now, where are they going to go that it's better? That's always the question. But there's a concern in Israeli society that this is, and I think it plays into Bible prophecy. They're going to, God will work with them the way he works with a lot of us. God very often brings us to the end of ourselves. And the only way we can function and move forward is to depend on God. He's our provider. And I think this is going to happen to Israel. As much as I support Israel, I don't think they're perfect. They've got a lot of evil people in their society, just like we have a lot of evil people in our society. Everything I could say about them, you can say about America. So, but the question is, so I personally think that this concern among former IDF people or people in the reserves and that type of thing is a valid concern, and I think in some respects it plays into Bible prophecy. So you might look it up, the article on Ynet. There's also an article at Redress Online by Gilad Atzmon, Atzmon, who discusses the article by the journalist in Ynet. I think it's a very good analysis. I don't agree with all of it, but I think it's something that you should read. And as I see all these things sort of lining up, I see, chess. They're playing a game of chess, and they're putting their pawns and others in position, in defensive and offensive positions. And I'm not sure that the world is really dealing with it. I'm not sure I know the answer. I'm not in charge. But Iran is being very clever, and they're pushing things to the brink. And they're going to do the same thing that North Korea does. So we live in a very troubling world. The earth is shaking. Geopolitics is shaking. It's an exciting time to be alive. Rest in the Lord. Trust in the Lord. Don't lean on your own understanding. Let the Lord provide for you and guide for you. Well, I could go on. Let's pray. Father, thank you for your word. Thanks so much for the things that you teach us, the ideas that you give us, or the facts about alignment of nations and peoples in the end times. We pray that you'll bless us this week, give us opportunities to share the gospel. Watch over us this week. In Jesus' name, amen.